The wall. Carvalho, I need your signature on these documents to start the new hospital wing project, the secretary said, as Philip looked thoughtfully at the view from his 20th floor office. Please leave them on my desk. I'll review them shortly, he replied, adjusting his tie before grabbing his briefcase. It was 9:30, and he had an important meeting at Santa Filomena Hospital. As he drove his BMW, Philip reviewed the project numbers in his mind. An astonishing €15 million investment to transform Lisbon's most esteemed private medical center through an ambitious renovation project. This endeavor has the potential to elevate his construction business to new heights. Upon arriving at the hospital, Sophia, his assistant, was waiting for him at the entrance. The investors are waiting in the third-floor meeting room, she informed him as they walked. However, Dr. Almeida requested that you first visit the areas designated for the new wing's construction. Can't we postpone this? Philip asked with a hint of frustration. She emphasized the importance of visualizing the entire project before the presentation. Philip let out a tired sigh. All right, let's proceed. They made their way through a series of corridors until they reached the maternity ward. The smell of disinfectant turned his stomach, resurrecting memories he wished to keep hidden. In that moment, he saw her. Eleanor was by the side of the crib, cradling the baby in her arms. Her brown hair was pulled back in a ponytail, wearing a nurse's uniform. She offered a gentle smile as she looked down at the newborn. The image hit him with the force of a shattering blow. He found himself unable to move. Eleanor looked up, and their eyes met in a moment of connection. Time seemed to stop. "Philip!" she whispered, instinctively pulling the baby closer to her heart. "You? What brings you here?" he managed to utter, his voice barely a whisper. "I work here in the neonatology unit." The silence that followed was palpable. Sophia, sensing the discomfort, cleared her throat. "Mr. Carvalho, the investors." "Just a moment," Philip interrupted, his gaze fixed on Eleanor and the baby. Is it yours?" The question hung in the air, thick and tense as Eleanor shook her head. "No, Philip. He's an abandoned baby. They found him this morning at the hospital door." Philip felt the air return to his lungs. Yet the knot in his throat remained, heavy and unbreakable. 2 years of separation vanished in an instant. "Mr. Carvalho," Sophia insisted. "We really need to—" "I'm coming," he replied, casting one last look at Eleanor, who had returned her attention to the baby. "We need to talk," he said, before turning away. "There's nothing to discuss, Philip," she replied, her gaze fixed elsewhere. "We've discussed everything 2 years ago." Philip clenched his fists and followed Sophia to the meeting room, leaving Eleanor and the baby behind, but taking with him the weight of unanswered questions and unfulfilled dreams. The meeting with the investors faded into a blur in Philip's mind as his thoughts lingered in the maternity ward. "The presentation was excellent," Sophia commented as they left the meeting room. "Are you okay?" "I need a moment," Philip replied, loosening his tie. "Where's the restroom?" He splashed cold water on his face in the bathroom. The reflection revealed an individual transformed in stark contrast to the confident businessman he once was. After drying his face, he left with a resolved purpose to seek out Eleanor. He found her in the nurse's lounge, alone, engrossed in filling out paperwork. "Can we talk?" he asked from the doorway. Eleanor looked up. "I'm busy, Philip." "Just 5 minutes, Eleanor, please." She set her pen down on the table. "What do you want to talk about? About your sudden absence after the divorce, or how you ignored my calls when I reached out about the pending paperwork?" "I know I was a coward," Philip confessed, sitting across from her. "But seeing you today with that baby—" "Don't do this, Philip," Eleanor interrupted him. "Don't use the baby as an excuse. His name is Tomas, by the way. I'm just fulfilling my responsibilities." "How long have you been in this position?" "It's been a year. After I sold the apartment you left, I decided to move hospitals. I was seeking a new beginning. The silence enveloped them, thick with memories. Do you remember the last time we were in a hospital together? Philip asked. Please don't do this, Eleanor urged him, her voice slightly trembling. It was when we went through the loss of our baby, he continued, after our third fertilization attempt. And after that, you became consumed by your work, Eleanor added, as if building structures could somehow mend the emptiness created by our lost child. Eleanor, No, Philip. I don't need your sympathy or your belated justifications. It's been 2 years. I've transformed my existence. I'm content as I am. A young nurse entered through the door. Eleanor, Tomas is crying. He's refusing the bottle. Eleanor rose without hesitation. I need to go, Philip insisted. Can we meet later? There's a new project at the hospital. We'll be crossing paths. This is a workplace, Philip. Let's maintain a professional atmosphere. Eleanor paused at the door. And please, don't bring up the past again. It doesn't hurt as much if we leave it. Philip watched her as she walked down the hallway, her white uniform disappearing into the sea of hospital staff. He sat there, reflecting on how two people who once shared everything could now barely maintain a polite exchange. His phone vibrated. It was Sophia. The revised plans await your approval. Philip put his phone down, choosing silence. The plans could wait for now. He found himself in a moment of reflection. He had to understand why seeing Eleanor with that baby stirred up emotions he thought were buried under layers of concrete and years of relentless dedication. The baby was discovered in a cardboard box, wrapped in a worn blanket. Marissa Oliveira detailed to Philip in her office. It's quite tragic, isn't it? Fortunately, Eleanor was there that morning. Philip approached the administrator, ostensibly to discuss project details. But the discussion naturally veered toward the abandoned baby. So, what will become of him? He asked, feigning disinterest. He currently remains under the temporary care of the hospital. Eleanor is personally looking after him, while social services work on the case. Eleanor always had a unique way with children, Philip whispered. I understand. In this past year, I've witnessed her professional growth. She's one of our best nurses. Philip shifted uncomfortably in his chair, a sense of unease washing over him. Did she share with you about? Can you tell me more about yourself? Indeed, he shared something with me. However, there's no need for concern. Personal narratives are not the focus in this context. The essential aspect is the work. A sudden knock on the door interrupted the flow of their discussion. It was Eleanor. Dr. Oliveira, I need your signature for... She stopped upon noticing Philip. Sorry, I'll return shortly. Come in, Eleanor, Marisa ordered. Mr. Carvalho had already started his departure. How is Tomas? He's better. Now he takes his bottle like a champion. His vitals are stable. Philip rose, but before he left, he asked, Why Tomas? For the first time that day, Eleanor met his gaze directly. Because it signifies what brings the light, and that is what he brought to the neonatal unit. Light indeed, Philip interjected. He deserves a name, Eleanor interrupted with conviction. I refuse to label him as the baby from Case 47 or the abandoned child from Door 3. Philip remembered conversations about baby names from years past. During the time when they were envisioning their family, Eleanor had always held a deep enthusiasm for this topic. I need the project documents on my desk tomorrow morning, Philip declared, abruptly changing the subject. Excuse me. He exited the office, acutely aware of Eleanor's eyes following him. He paused in the hallway, looking at the neonatal unit window. Tomas rested serenely in his crib, oblivious to the turmoil forming in the outside world. A caretaker approached the crib to examine the monitors. Do you know him? She asked upon seeing Philip. No, he said, turning and hurrying away. I was just passing through. As he made his way to the exit, his thoughts kept returning to that cardboard box and the tattered blanket inside. What kind of desperation could lead a person to abandon their own offspring? Perhaps, he thought, there were several forms of abandonment, some more apparent than others. What do you think is the best way to handle grief? To embrace it or to escape it through work and distraction? Share your thoughts. I've reviewed the plans for the new wing, Philip commented, sitting in his office that night. However, there's one aspect that escapes my understanding. What is it? Sophia asked, preparing to take notes. Why didn't anyone mention that Eleanor was working there? Sophia closed her notebook. I didn't think it was relevant to the project, sir. You didn't find it relevant that my ex-wife is employed at the hospital where we plan to build? With all due respect, Mr. Carvalho, you rarely speak about your personal life, and the information we received pertained to the administrative staff, not the nursing staff. Philip massaged his temples. The day's images continued to swirl in his mind. Should we look for another hospital for the project? Sophia proposed. No, he replied curtly. This project holds significant importance. His cell phone vibrated. A message arrived from Marissa. We need to go over some specific details regarding the neonatal area. Shall we meet tomorrow? Please schedule a meeting with Dr. Oliveira for tomorrow, he instructed Sophia. At what time? Any time, with the exception of the nurse's shift change. Sophia looked at him with a deep sense of empathy. The shift change is at 3? Then that means 11, Philip replied as he stood. I'm going home. In the parking lot, his phone vibrated once more. This time it was his mother. What did you think of the hospital meeting? She asked. Good, he replied brusquely. Did you see her? Philip paused just before getting into his car. How do you know? Son, Lisbon is a small place, and I still keep in touch with a few people at the hospital. Mom, I really don't want to talk about this. You never want to talk about anything, Philip, just like your father. You know, sometimes silence can be more damaging than words. I need to drive, Mom. We'll talk about this later. As he drove home, he passed the building that once held memories of his life with Eleanor. The light in the 7th floor apartment was on. New faces, new beginnings. He remembered the last night they shared in that place 2 years prior. The stacked boxes, the heavy quiet, the unspoken thoughts. We can't go on like this, Eleanor had commented that night. Is this what it's like? To exist as if we're strangers, resting in different rooms, keeping our distance from one another. I'm overwhelmed with work, Eleanor. The construction company, the projects, the meetings. There's always something that takes priority over us. Philip returned to reality, shaking his head. The traffic light was green. A horn blared behind him. He accelerated, distancing himself from the building and the memories it harbored. Yet the unease in his stomach persisted, reminiscent of 2 years ago. The new project model dominated the meeting room's focal point. Philip highlighted the diverse areas as he explained. The new wing will consist of 5 floors. The first floor will be dedicated exclusively to neonates and pediatric intensive care. What's the reason for starting with newborns? One of the investors asked. Because it's where the need is greatest, Marissa answered before Philip. Our current unit is overwhelmed. In that moment, Eleanor entered, carrying some documents. She paused at the door, waiting. The project features 25 new incubators, Philip continued, deliberately avoiding her gaze, and an area dedicated to abandoned babies. The investors shared knowing glances. Abandoned babies? Wouldn't it be more advantageous to focus on the patients who can pay? A man asked. Eleanor stepped forward. Excuse me, but... Eleanor, Marissa warned. No, doctor. They need to understand something important. Eleanor approached the table. These babies didn't choose their circumstances. As a healthcare institution, we have a societal obligation. Ma'am, one of the investors began. Nurse Solorzano, she clarified. I've witnessed babies die due to our lack of space and resources. Does that seem like a viable business model to you? Eleanor, please, Philip interrupted. This is a private meeting. Of course, private, like every one of your significant meetings, isn't it? Silence engulfed the room. Marissa cleared her throat. Perhaps a break would be prudent, she proposed. The investors departed, leaving Philip and Eleanor alone with Marissa. I apologize, Eleanor whispered. I got carried away. Your arguments hold weight, Philip commented, taking her by surprise. In fact, I had already factored that into the budget. The abandoned baby wing will be funded by a special fund. It won't be dependent on the investors. Eleanor looked at him, her expression one of confusion. Why? She asked. Because it's the right thing to do, he answered, picking up his papers. And because someone once showed me that everyone deserves a chance. With that, he left the room, leaving Eleanor in a stunned silence. Marissa offered a faint smile. People evolve, Eleanor, the doctor commented. Sometimes, all they need is a little time. Ah, an abandoned baby, Eleanor murmured, looking at the blueprint laid out on the table. The hospital cafeteria was almost deserted. Philip stirred his coffee distractedly, not taking a sip, as Eleanor sat across from him, cradling her cup in her hands. Thank you for agreeing to talk with me, he said. I'm not doing this for you, Eleanor replied. I'm doing it for the project. I need confirmation on whether you will actually proceed with what you mentioned regarding the abandoned baby area. I have all the necessary documentation. I can present you with the paperwork. Why, Philip? Why now? Is there a need for a justification for doing a good deed? You always seem to have a reason. There's always a hidden motive. Philip set his spoon down on the table. Encountering Tomas sparked a reflection within me. Let's not involve Tomas in this matter. It's simply the reality, Eleanor. Observe how you care for him, as I would have cared for our child. That's what you were going to express. The air grew heavy with unspoken words. When I proposed the idea of adoption, Eleanor continued, you insisted it was a substitute, that you yearned for your own lineage, your own last name. I was an idiot. You were? I'm still an idiot, but at least now I'm aware of it. Eleanor took a sip of her coffee. You know what's most painful? It's that we weren't even in conflict, just you chose to drift away. Our dinners meant for us became meetings with clients. Our nights together transformed into long nights at the office. The work was just a facade, Philip confessed. I was afraid. Afraid of what? Of not being good enough, of disappointing you as I did before. Please don't say that. It no longer matters, Eleanor declared, rising. I need to go back. Tomas needs his medication. Eleanor, if you truly wish to make a positive impact, honor your commitment to the project. These little ones deserve a proper home. I'll make sure of it. Don't make commitments to me. Make them to those who truly matter. Eleanor left, leaving Philip alone with his cold coffee and his reflections. From the cafeteria window, he glimpsed the designated location for the new wing's construction. Concrete and glass structures, he desired, might begin to repair something of what he had destroyed. His mother arrived, Sophia declared through the intercom. Philip barely had a moment to lift his head before Rosa Ribeiro entered his office, radiating elegance in her perfectly tailored suit. What's the delay today? Philip asked. Does a mother need justifications to visit her son? You always have your justifications, Mom. Rosa positioned herself in front of the desk. Marissa shared details with me about the hospital project. When did you start having conversations with Marissa? Since the beginning. She was the one who attended to me when what? Rosa let out a heavy sigh. When we brought you into our family, son? Philip felt the atmosphere around him shift, as if the very air was draining away. What is this? At 25 years old, I found myself at a pivotal point in life. I couldn't have children. Your father and I explored every option, just as you and Eleanor have. This is impossible. Marissa was a young resident at that time. She assisted us throughout the process. Philip rose abruptly. Why are you bringing this up now? It's essential that you're informed. I noticed the way you looked at Eleanor with disdain when she brought up the idea of adoption. That was different. Why? Because I'm not your real mother. No, you are my mother. Exactly, Rosa smiled. Just as you could have been the real father to any child you adopted. Philip sank into his chair. Does Dad know? Your father was the one who pushed for the adoption. He expressed that love creates families, not just genetics. Why did you never inform me? Initially, because of your diminutive size. In retrospect, it seems the timing was never quite aligned. Philip remembered every occasion he had spoken with pride of the Carvalho lineage, the family blood, and the significance of the surname. Eleanor whispered softly, Rosa commented. Eleanor understood this more profoundly than you. She observes daily that love transcends biology. I need to go, Philip replied, rising. I need some time to reflect. Son, Rosa called out before he left. Don't confuse blood with love. From the first moment our eyes met, you captured your father's and my hearts, just as someone might have appreciated. Mom, I really need some time to myself. He left the office and wandered the city streets without a clear destination. He found himself, not particularly surprised, in the hospital parking lot. From this vantage point, he could glimpse the neonatal unit window, where he was certain Eleanor would be caring for Tomas. The sound of his phone ringing broke the silence. A message arrived from Marissa. I heard from your mother. When you're ready to talk, I'm here for you. Philip found Marissa in her office, thumbing through files despite it being after closing hours. How many others knew? He asked from the threshold. Only Dr. Costa, who has since passed away, and I. Marissa replied, her gaze fixed elsewhere. Sit down. Eleanor never. No, I never revealed it to her. That was not my place. Philip sank into the chair. All this time. You were an adorable little boy, Philip, Marissa smiled. Rosa was overcome with tears as she embraced you tightly. And what about me? The woman who brought me into this world? She was quite young. She desired for you to experience a life filled with more opportunities, just as Tomas's mother did. Every narrative unfolds in a unique way, Philip. Indeed, love can often entail the act of letting go. Down the hall, Eleanor's voice floated softly, a gentle melody that wove through the air. He was completing his nightly rounds. Did you know that she's seeking to adopt Tomas? Marissa asked. Philip looked at her in astonishment. You? This? It's still in progress. The social worker is scheduled to come next week for a final evaluation. But is it really possible? I mean, she's alone and the world is different now, Philip. And Eleanor has a great deal to offer. A stable job, her own place, and excellent references. She has her own place? Yes. The apartment you left, she's completely transformed it. The guest room has become a nursery. Philip remembered that room. They had decorated it together years ago, envisioning the child who never came. She was always prepared, he whispered. And you weren't, Marissa finished. But that doesn't mean you're a bad person, just someone who needed time to understand certain things. What do you mean? Families can take many forms. Love is not confined to genetic ties. Sometimes, the most wonderful parents are those who consciously decide to embrace the role, rather than those who find themselves in it by chance. Eleanor passed by the office, gently cradling Tomas. He didn't notice them. "He seems content," Philip commented. "He is," Marissa replied. "He found his way. The question is, have you discovered yours?" Philip rose. "Thank you, Marissa." "For what?" "For safeguarding the secret, for looking out for Eleanor, for everything you have done. Just go home, Philip. It's been a long day." In the parking lot, Philip cast a final glance toward the illuminated window where Eleanor was caring for Tomas. He wondered if this was the same feeling his father had experienced 35 years prior, looking through another hospital window, longing to take home a child who was not of his blood, but would enrich his life with love. Do you believe that building a new future requires letting go of the past completely? Or can old wounds be transformed into a source of strength? Share your thoughts. We, the Carvalhos, always built for the future. His father's voice resonated in the corporate video. Philip watched it from his computer in the dimly lit office. "Sir," Sophia interrupted from the doorway, "the contractors are ready to start demolition at the hospital, awaiting your signature. We've already cleared the area. Indeed, the neonatal unit has been temporarily relocated to the 3rd floor." Philip closed the laptop with a decisive click. "Eleanor, did she confirm the transfer for Nurse Solorzano?" "Indeed. He spearheaded the entire organization. He states that as long as the babies are safe, everything else is simply a matter of organization." "Exactly like her," Philip whispered. "Pardon?" "Nothing. Bring the documents." As he signed, he recalled the discussion with his mother. The Carvalhos, a family legacy, built on a hidden truth for decades. His phone vibrated. A message arrived from Eleanor. "It's time to discuss the revised plans." "I'm heading to the hospital," he declared, rising. "However, the board decided to reschedule everything at the hospital." He found Eleanor in the makeshift unit, inspecting the amenities. "The electrical connections are insufficient," she declared, avoiding any courtesy. "I understand. Is it only for now?" "A newborn in an incubator cannot comprehend chaos, Philip. That is why I brought this." He unfolded a set of blueprints. "Urgent adjustments. We can reinforce the electrical system today." Eleanor examined the plans. "When?" "Last night. Sleep escaped me." "Why?" Philip briefly paused. "Did you know that I am adopted?" Eleanor looked up in astonishment. "You?" "I found out yesterday. My mother, Marissa, was present when—" "Philip, all this time." "Eleanor, all those times I spoke of the family lineage, the importance of Carvalho blood." "Stop," Eleanor interrupted softly. "Please, don't go down this path." "What path?" "Trying to use this as a means to, I don't know, fix things or something. It's not that simple." "What is it then?" Philip looked out the window, observing the peaceful view of several babies, nestled in their cribs, lost in sleep. "It's the realization, finally, that I was wrong. You were right. That family thing." "Philip, please, it's been 2 years. I've already come to a conclusion regarding Tomas. I understand, and I'm genuinely happy for you, for both of you." Eleanor fixed her gaze on him, searching for any hint of deception in his declarations. "I simply desire to make the right decision," he commented. "For these little ones, for the medical team, for all the things I neglected in the past." "That's right," Eleanor responded after a pause. "Let's begin with the electrical connections. Tomorrow marks the beginning of demolitions," Philip declared during the team meeting. "The process will take 3 weeks." Pinsky, the medical team, absorbed his every word as he pointed to the blueprints displayed on the wall. "What happens if they uncover structural issues?" Eleanor asked from the back of the room. "We have backup strategies in place," Philip responded. "We will prioritize patient safety above all else." Marisa observed the interaction with great curiosity. The dynamic between them had shifted. He had become a figure of greater professionalism and maturity. Following the meeting, Philip found himself gathering his documents. "The social worker is coming today," Marisa commented as she approached. "I understand. How do you know?" "You're one of the most palpable grooms to have ever." He had dedicated the last 3 nights to meticulously organizing the documents. "You're quite familiar with her." "I knew her," Philip clarified. Now he feels changed, for better or for worse, just different. A sudden knock on the door interrupted the flow of their conversation. It was Sophia. "Mr. Carvalho, a discovery has been made during the initial inspection." "What is it?" "You should come take a look." In the demolition area, a group of workers gathered around an uncovered wall. "It's part of the original structure," the foreman explained. "This place has a history that dates back more than a century to when it was a convent." "Will this affect the construction plans?" Philip asked. "Will it be necessary to alter the complete design to maintain its integrity?" "What would the project delay be?" 2 months at least. Philip looked at the weathered wall. The bare bricks whispered stories of dedication and craftsmanship that spanned generations. "Proceed," he ordered. "Revise the plans. This all stays." "However, sir, the extra expense. There are certain things that deserve to be preserved," Philip interrupted. "This hospital has a rich legacy. Let's respect it." Eleanor watched the scene unfold from the hallway. Their eyes met for a brief moment, connecting with Philip. She nodded slightly before turning and returning to the neonatal unit, where the social worker awaited her for the final interview. "Tomas has a fever," Eleanor declared, bending over the incubator. 39 degrees. As darkness enveloped the hospital, the clamor of construction machines faded into silence. "The antibiotics should be working," Dr. Santos said, his eyes scanning the chart. "Something's not right," Eleanor insisted, her concern palpable. "His breathing is rapid." In that instant, the monitors exploded with alarms. "He's convulsing!" Eleanor screamed. A flurry of chaos erupted around her. The medical team rushed in, orders echoed in the air, and alarms blared loudly. Philip, engrossed in evaluating the developments on the floor below, heard the urgent announcement of a code blue over the loudspeakers. "Neonatal unit, code blue." Instinct took over as he sprinted up the stairs. Upon arriving, he saw Eleanor through the glass, diligently administering compressions on Tomas's fragile chest. "Come on, little one," she whispered softly. "Don't give up." The minutes dragged on interminably. Finally, the heart monitor showed a steady rhythm. Eleanor exited the room. Exhaustion weighed on her, and she was surprised to find Philip there. "What are you doing here?" "I heard the code," he responded. "He's stable," Eleanor sighed. "For now." She sank into a chair, trembling slightly. Philip took off his jacket and placed it over her shoulders. "The social worker," Eleanor began. "She's going to approve," Philip interrupted. "She'd be a fool not to." "How can you be so certain?" "Because I saw you in there. Because anyone who sees you with him." "Philip, no." "Let me finish my thought. You're the most wonderful mother Tomas could ever have." He expressed this as someone who had encountered remarkable adoptive mothers. Eleanor looked at him in surprise at the openness in his tone. "The flowers?" she exclaimed unexpectedly. "What is it?" "The flowers that welcome new life. They're the same ones I used to have at home. Golden flowers that reach for the sun. Ah, Philip scratched the back of his neck, feeling a wave of discomfort wash over him. The landscaper asked which flowers to choose, and in that moment— "Thank you," Eleanor interrupted. "For remembering. There are countless memories that linger, Eleanor." The silence that followed felt different from the previous ones. It was less fraught, more contemplative. "I need to get back to Tomas," Eleanor said finally, taking off the jacket. "Of course. And Eleanor?" "Yes, everything will be all right. Both of them will be." Eleanor nodded and returned to the unit. Philip stood for a moment, watching through the glass as she tenderly adjusted the blankets around the baby. The sunflowers at the entrance cast their reflection on the window, silent witnesses to a new kind of connection between two people who once shared everything. "The adoption has been approved," Marissa declared, entering Philip's temporary office at the hospital. "Eleanor already knows. They'll make the official announcement this afternoon. Indeed, Tomas will be recognized as her son in a legal sense." Philip set aside the plans he had been examining. "Well, they deserve it, you know." Eleanor requested that the waiting area be altered in the new plans. Why? She wants a space where parents can be near their children without interrupting medical work. She states that waiting is the most challenging aspect. "I've already made some changes," Philip responded. "I included a section with reclining armchairs and a small kitchen. When will this happen?" 7 days prior? It was clear it was necessary. Marissa smiled. "You've changed, Philip." "No, I simply perceive things from a different perspective." A sudden knock on the door interrupted the flow of conversation. It was Eleanor. "May I intervene?" she asked. "By all means," Marissa replied, rising. "In fact, I was just about to leave." Once they were alone, Eleanor walked to the table. "The social worker handed me the final paperwork," she commented, presenting a folder. "Well done. I appreciate it." Eleanor paused briefly. "I have a question for you." "What is it?" "Why the wall?" "The old wall?" "Yes. I understand that keeping it intact is delaying the entire project." Philip rose and walked to the window. From that vantage point, they observed the partially demolished building, its centuries-old wall defiantly intact. "When I was a boy," he began, "my father brought me to this very place. He pointed to this hospital and said, 'Son, we don't just build buildings, we create spaces where life unfolds.' I didn't grasp his meaning until now." And what was he conveying? That certain things hold a value greater than money or time? That there are narratives that deserve to be preserved? Eleanor approached the window. "Tomas is better now," she commented. "The fever hasn't returned. I understand. I review the reports daily. But why? What's the significance? Because regardless of our circumstances, even if things change, I genuinely care about what is important to you." Eleanor stared at him intently. "The wall," she commented finally. "It reminds me of our relationship." "In what way?" "As something ancient, that endures through transformations. Different, but resilient." "Eleanor, it's not all right. It's the best. Different, but intact." He averted his gaze from the window and walked to the door. "The adoption ceremony is on Friday," he said before leaving. "If you wish to attend, I will be there." Philip responded. Eleanor nodded and left, the lingering resonance of an invitation that months ago would have seemed unimaginable. The social services office was permeated with the smell of old paper and lukewarm coffee. Eleanor sat in silence as Mrs. Rocha, the social worker, meticulously perused the documents once more. "Everything appears to be in order," she declared finally. "We just need one last signature right here." Eleanor took the pen with a trembling hand. This was the moment she had anticipated. Is this truly what you want? Navigating life as a single mother is quite a challenge. I've never been more certain of anything in my life. There is one more thing, the social worker added. We received an additional letter of recommendation. From whom? From a Mr. Felipe Carvalho. He states that you are the most capable person he knows to embrace motherhood. Eleanor remained motionless, the pen hovering above the page. No, she did not know. It was not necessary for her to know. However, it had a significant impact on the final decision. It's rare for someone of his stature to dedicate the time to compose something like this. Eleanor signed the document, holding back tears. Tomas Solorzano, Mrs. Rocha read aloud. That's a lovely name. It belonged to my grandfather, Eleanor responded. He was a man who understood that family extends beyond blood ties. Upon returning to the hospital, she saw Philip supervising the tasks at hand. Why did you do that? She asked directly. Do what? Came the response. The letter of recommendation. Philip set aside the blueprints he had been examining. Because it was the right decision. Because you deserve happiness. Your assistance was not required. I am aware. My actions were not intended to assist you. I did it because it's the truth. They exchanged glances, the sounds of construction filling the air around them. Friday. The ceremony is at 11. I know. I've already requested the day off. Eleanor nodded and turned away, pausing just before she left. Philip? Yes, thank you. The word hung in the air, heavy with meaning, before Eleanor disappeared down the corridor toward the neonatal unit, where Tomas was waiting for her. Philip looked at the void she left behind, reflecting on the countless letters she never wrote, the truths she kept hidden, and how, sometimes, love is about letting go and offering support from a distance. The night before the adoption ceremony, Philip found himself restless. Through his Lisbon, blinking like scattered stars. Suddenly, his phone rang. It was Sophia. Sir, there's an emergency at the hospital. What happened? A water leak has damaged part of the electrical system in the temporary neonatal area. Philip was already putting on his jacket. I'm heading there. Upon arriving at the hospital, he discovered Eleanor in the midst of evacuating the babies. The emergency generator is failing, she said, maneuvering an incubator with urgency. Tomas and 2 other babies require a constant power supply. Where are they being taken? To Elasu, but it's at full capacity. There are not enough connections. Philip assimilated the scene around him. My temporary office, he commented unexpectedly, is equipped with its own generator for the construction computers. Are you sure? Absolutely. Let's go. And they collaborated for several hours, moving equipment, connecting cables, ensuring that each baby was safe. At 3 a.m, everything was finally in order. Eleanor sat down on a chair next to Tomas's incubator. In just a few hours, he will officially be my son, she whispered. He is your son, Philip responded. The document merely legitimizes it. Do you remember those nights we spent awake like this? Eleanor asked, planning the future, discussing the possibility of having children. No, it's okay. Things have changed. Everything has changed. Tomas stirred inside his incubator, emitting gentle sounds. He looks like you, Philip commented. You? When he sleeps, he makes the same gestures you do, Eleanor smiled. Babies absorb knowledge from their caregivers, just as I did from my parents, Philip commented. From my guardians. They fell into silence, observing Tomas as he slept. The monitors glowed softly, their lights dancing like fireflies in the night. It's time for you to get some rest, Philip suggested finally. Tomorrow is very significant. Will you be by his side? Indeed. Proceed with tranquility. Eleanor rose from her seat and walked toward the door. Before leaving, she cast a glance back. Sometimes, she murmured softly, events may not unfold as intended. However, That does not imply that they are unfavorable. Philip nodded as Eleanor slipped into the hospital night, leaving him with Tomas and the awareness that love often reveals itself in unexpected forms, just like the moths drawn to a flickering light. The new pavilion shone under the morning sun as the first guests began to gather: hospital officials, investors, the medical team. "It's beautiful," Eleanor murmured, cradling Tomas as she admired the facade that perfectly blended the old stone with the contemporary glass. "Is everything functioning as you anticipated?" Philip asked, approaching. "Better than that. The new incubators are exceptional, and the area for peace. Your concept was the foundation, but you improved it significantly." Tomas reached out his small hands to Philip, who paused briefly before smiling. "You are capable of carrying him," Eleanor commented. "He doesn't bite yet?" Philip cradled the baby with care. Tomas promptly grabbed his tie. "He's got a certain strength," he commented. "Just like his mother," Marissa commented, entering their conversation. "It's time for the speech, Philip." He returned the baby to Eleanor and walked toward the podium. Suddenly, the noise faded. This structure began. It is more than just concrete and glass. This is a commitment to every newborn who is welcomed here, to every family that anticipates in these corridors, to every journey that begins within these limits. He paused, looking at the weathered wall. "My father instilled in me the belief that we create more than just structures. We create environments where life unfolds, where families unite, where love blossoms, often in unexpected ways." His gaze met Eleanor's for a brief moment. This pavilion serves as a connection between history and what lies ahead. Just like the wall we preserved, it serves as a reminder that certain elements must endure, while others adapt and change into something fresh, something improved. Tomas laughed, breaking the seriousness of the occasion. Some people chuckled, and with a smile, Philip concluded, "That is the genuine sound of hope, the sound through which we build, the sound of what lies ahead." The applause erupted as he cut the ribbon. Eleanor approached with Tomas. "That was a quite impressive speech," she commented. "I took my cues from the best," he said, looking at her and his parents in the audience. "Did you know, Tomas will need godparents for his baptism?" Philip looked at her in astonishment. "Consider it," Eleanor commented, before turning to welcome the guests eager to meet Tomas. Philip continued to watch them, reflecting on how life often builds bridges where there once were walls. "Are you willing to assume the role of Tomas's godfather?" Eleanor asked, with a sense of formality a week later as they sat in the hospital cafeteria. "Are you sure?" Philip responded, stirring his coffee. "Absolutely. Your transformation has become evident. And Tomas, have you noticed the way he smiles at you?" The new pavilion buzzed with energy around them. Healthcare professionals came and went. Families anxiously awaited updates. Life flowed, as it always does. "What will your family say?" "They already know. They agree. Marissa will be the godmother." Philip smiled. "Absolutely. It will be Marissa." "So, what do you think?" "I think it would be a privilege." Eleanor nodded with a sense of satisfaction. "The baptism is scheduled for next month. I appreciate all that you've done. For the pavilion, for your encouragement, for your insight." "Thank you," he said, "for showing me that families can take many forms." "Yes." They rose from the table. Eleanor was ready to return to her shift, while Philip prepared for a meeting with potential investors. "No," she said. "What you're saying is that perhaps we have to lose our way to rediscover who we are, but in a new light. Similar to the old wall within the modern structure." Philip contributed. Precisely. Not everything that is old requires destruction. Some things simply need to discover their new home. They bid each other goodbye with a smile, each embarking on their own journey through the hospital corridors. The old wall stood between them, a silent witness to a story that had not concluded, but had evolved into something fresh, something unforeseen, something improved. And in the neonatal unit, Tomas slept placidly, unaware of how his presence had begun to mend old scars and forge new connections between the remnants of the past and the hope of what was to come. A year later, the neonatal unit was alive with energy. 3 new incubators had arrived that morning, and Eleanor was overseeing their installation while Tomas played in his portable playpen in Marissa's office. "Mommy!" Tomas yelled when he saw Eleanor come in. "Wait just a moment, my love," she replied, signing the last of the documents. Philip was in the doorway, holding a small package wrapped in colorful gift paper. "Am I late?" he asked. "Right on time," Marissa responded with a smile. It was Tomas's first year at the hospital. He crawled eagerly toward his godfather, who lifted him effortlessly, a skill perfected over time. "I can't believe he's already been with us for a year," Eleanor commented as she set down the papers. "Time flies," Marissa commented. "Just like the hospital project. Did you know that we already have a waiting list for transfers?" "That's why I'm here," Philip responded. "The board gave the green light for the expansion. We will build an additional floor." Eleanor smiled. "Will it have the same design?" "They have proven to be quite beneficial." Tomas began to stir, his anticipation growing as he longed to unwrap his gift. "Go ahead, open it," Philip urged him, setting him on the table. Inside was a small toy stethoscope. Tomas's eyes lit up. "Like Mommy's," Philip explained. "Like the one your godfather used to listen to the old wall during construction," Marissa added with a smile. Eleanor took the stethoscope and carefully placed it in Tomas's ears. "Now you can listen to the heartbeat of the hospital," she commented, referring to both the old and the new. Tomas giggled, pressing the device against the table, the walls, and his mother's heart. Outside, the afternoon sun illuminated the old wall, now perfectly woven into the modern structure, looking like a scar that had merged with history, a testament to the idea that some things need not be destroyed, but transformed to emerge stronger. Inside that office, amidst people who understood that love takes many forms, Tomas listened intently, discovering the rhythms of his own narrative, a narrative that was just beginning to unfold.
10 years. A whole decade had passed since Ryan Carter last set foot in Ridgewood, the small town he once called home. But today, he had no choice. His black Cadillac glided down the quiet roads, flanked by maple trees turning shades of amber and crimson. His expression remained cold, yet his grip on the steering wheel tightened. He didn't want to be here. But one letter had changed everything. Eleanor Carter, his only grandmother, had passed away 3 weeks ago, leaving behind an unexpected condition in her will. Ryan had to stay in Ridgewood for 3 months to claim his inheritance. How could she force him back to a place he had spent 10 years trying to forget? Ryan let out a bitter chuckle, but inside, all he felt was resentment. 3 months, just an obligation. Sign the papers, collect what was his, and leave for good. But what Ryan didn't know was that this return would change his life forever. Ridgewood was almost unchanged. The same quiet streets, the same old shops, and the same faces that once made up Ryan's past. But to him, this place was nothing more than a temporary stop. His black Cadillac turned onto the road leading to Carter Estate, the grand house where he had grown up. The Victorian mansion stood tall, regal yet melancholic. The iron gates creaked as he stepped through, the crisp autumn air biting against his skin. At the entrance, Martha Whitman, the longtime housekeeper, was already waiting. Her expression was a mixture of relief and hesitation. "You finally came," she said, her voice hoarse with age. Ryan nodded and stepped inside. The house still smelled of old wood, of time frozen in place. Everything remained untouched, as if Eleanor had never left. Martha watched him for a moment before speaking softly. "She really wanted you to come back." Ryan scoffed, running his fingers over the antique wooden table. "She knew I had no other choice." "It wasn't about the will, Ryan," Martha pressed, her gaze steady. "She knew there was something else in Ridgewood you needed to face." Ryan froze, his dark blue eyes narrowing. He knew exactly what Martha was referring to, but he refused to acknowledge it. 3 months, he said coldly. "Just 3 months, and I'm gone." But deep inside, an uneasy feeling was creeping in. The next morning, Ryan drove aimlessly through the familiar streets of Ridgewood. He had no real destination, just killing time. Yet somehow he found himself standing in front of Dawson's Cafe, the place he used to visit every morning before leaving town 10 years ago. The cafe looked exactly the same. The striped blue and white awning, the old wooden sign, the scent of freshly brewed coffee drifting through the air. An odd sense of nostalgia tugged at him as he stepped inside. And then he saw her, Emily Dawson, the girl he had once loved, the girl he had left behind in pursuit of something greater. Her soft brown hair cascaded over her shoulders, and her green eyes still shone as brightly as he remembered. She was standing near the counter, completely unaware of his presence. But what stopped him cold wasn't Emily. It was the small boy standing beside her, about 9 or 10 years old, with dark wavy hair and piercing blue eyes. His blue eyes. Ryan's chest tightened, his breath caught in his throat. The boy was laughing, his face lighting up as he licked his ice cream cone. For a brief second, Ryan saw his younger self standing in the exact same spot, holding the exact same ice cream. The boy turned, and their eyes met. For a moment, time stopped. Ryan felt like the ground had vanished beneath him. This boy, it couldn't be, but it was. Emily turned then, her gaze locking onto Ryan's. For a split second, shock flickered across her face, followed quickly by panic. Without hesitation, she grabbed the boy's hand and rushed out the door. Ryan stood frozen, his mind racing to catch up. Then, instinct took over. He shoved the door open and ran after them. But Emily and the child had already disappeared into the crowd, leaving Ryan standing there, his heart pounding and 1,000 questions raging in his mind. Ryan returned to Carter Estate, his mind spinning with 100 thoughts. That boy was his son. There was no doubt about it. Seated in the leather armchair of his study, he couldn't shake the image of those blue eyes, eyes that mirrored his own as a child. But if the boy was truly his, why hadn't anyone told him? His grip on the whiskey glass tightened before he stood abruptly, storming off to find Martha. The elderly housekeeper was tidying up the library when Ryan walked in, his gaze piercing. You knew, didn't you? His voice was raw. Martha didn't flinch. She calmly placed a book down and sighed. You saw Emily. It wasn't a question. Ryan let out a bitter laugh. I saw my son. Martha lowered her gaze, as if she had been waiting for this moment. Eleanor tried to reach you, she murmured. She called, she wrote letters, but you never responded. The words hit like a punch to the gut. How much had he missed? He turned away, staring blankly at the bookshelves. 10 years. He had spent 10 years consumed by his ambition, chasing something bigger, and in the process he had lost something far greater than he could ever imagine. Did Emily ever try to find me? His voice was barely audible. Marta nodded. She went to New York once, but when she saw you, with someone else, she walked away. Ryan closed his eyes, a sharp pain cutting through his chest. He had always thought he was in control, but the truth was, he had let the most important thing in his life slip away without even knowing it. That night, for the first time in years, Ryan couldn't sleep. Ryan lay in his old bed at Carter Estate, staring at the towering ceiling above, but his mind was far from the present. It had traveled back 10 years ago. The last night he spent in Ridgewood, the last night he spent with Emily. He remembered it vividly, a warm summer night, heavy raindrops pattering against the roof. Emily had climbed through his bedroom window, just like she always did when they were young. Her smile was radiant in the dim light, her green eyes filled with love and trust. You're really leaving tomorrow? She whispered, her voice trembling. Ryan didn't answer right away. He cupped her face, tracing the delicate features he knew by heart. Emily had always been the one bright thing in his life, the only reason Ridgewood had ever felt like home. I have to, Em, he finally said. He had dreamed of New York since he was a boy. He couldn't let himself be tied down to a small town, to an ordinary life, but deep down he knew the only thing making him hesitate was her. That night they made love for the last time. The rain drummed against the roof, blending with soft gasps, whispered confessions, and desperate touches, as if they were trying to hold on to each other for as long as possible. But by morning, as the first rays of sunlight broke through the horizon, Ryan was gone. No goodbye, no message, no calls. He had thought it was the right choice. He thought Emily would forget him. But now, lying in his childhood home, with the image of a boy with his eyes haunting him, Ryan realized he had been wrong. So very wrong. The next morning, Ryan drove straight to Emily's house. There was no more time to hesitate. He needed answers. The house, a charming colonial-style home, sat nestled beneath towering trees. It looked warm, full of life, the complete opposite of the emptiness clawing at Ryan's chest. He took a deep breath, clenched his fists, and knocked on the door. A moment later, the door slowly creaked open. Emily stood there, wrapped in a thin cardigan, her brown hair cascading over her shoulders. Her expression was guarded, wary, but there was something else hidden beneath it. Something Ryan couldn't quite read. You shouldn't be here. Her voice was steady, but there was a slight tremor. Ryan refused to back down. I have the right to know. Emily crossed her arms. Know what? Ryan clenched his jaw, his emotions boiling over. That boy, Jake? He's mine, isn't he? A heavy silence settled between them. Emily pressed her lips together, her eyes swirling with emotions she was trying so hard to suppress. Then she let out a breath, soft but weighted. Yeah, one word, and it shattered Ryan. His heartbeat thundered in his chest, his mind spinning out of control. He had a son, a child he had never even known existed. Why didn't you tell me? He whispered, his voice hoarse. Emily held his gaze, her green eyes glistening, but her stance unwavering. You left, Ryan. You never came back. You never called, never answered a single letter. Do you really think that if I told you, you would have stayed? Ryan opened his mouth, but no words came out, because he didn't know. Emily was right, and that realization hurt more than anything else. Ryan left Emily's house feeling empty. He had braced himself for her anger, but nothing could have prepared him for the brutal truth. Emily never told him about Jake because she didn't believe he would stay. And worst of all, she might have been right. But now things were different. He couldn't walk away again. The next day, Ryan spotted Jake at the park. The boy was sitting on a swing, his small legs kicking at the air. Emily sat on a nearby bench, engrossed in her book, unaware that Ryan was watching. Taking a deep breath, Ryan stepped forward and spoke softly. "Hey, buddy." Jake looked up, his bright blue eyes filled with curiosity. "Who are you?" he asked innocently. Ryan's throat tightened. His own son had no idea who he was. "I'm a friend of your mom's." His voice felt foreign in his own mouth. Jake nodded, then grinned. "I can swing really high. Mom says I just have to believe in it." Ryan smiled, warmth spreading through his chest. "She's right. You just have to believe." It was a fleeting moment, but it meant everything. Before Ryan could say more, Emily stood up. "Jake, it's time to go." Her tone was calm, but her eyes were filled with caution. Jake pouted but obeyed. Ryan looked at Emily, his gaze pleading silently. She hesitated for a long moment before finally letting out a quiet sigh. "Jake has a baseball game tomorrow at 4 p.m. She paused, locking eyes with him. "If you really mean what you say, show up." Then she took Jake's hand and walked away. Ryan stood frozen, his heart pounding with the first spark of hope. The next afternoon, Ryan arrived at the baseball field 30 minutes early. He couldn't afford to miss this. The Ridgewood youth team had drawn a big crowd. Laughter and cheers filled the air. Ryan scanned the field, searching for Jake. And then he saw him. Jake stood on the pitcher's mound, his cap slightly askew, his small face full of determination. Emily sat in the stands, arms crossed, casting cautious glances toward Ryan. Ryan took a seat, his eyes never leaving his son. The game began. Jake was good, and Ryan felt an unexpected swell of pride. Then came the final inning. Jake was up to bat. The tension in the air was thick. First swing, a miss. Ryan saw his son's shoulders drop. Without thinking, he stood up. "You got this, buddy. Just focus." Jake turned, his eyes widening in surprise. This time, he gripped the bat tighter, taking a deep breath. The ball came flying toward him, and this time, he connected. The crowd erupted in cheers as Jake sprinted around the bases. When he reached home plate, Jake glanced toward the stands. For a brief moment, his gaze locked onto Ryan's. And then, Jake smiled. A small, hesitant smile, but it made Ryan's heart clench. He knew then, even if it was just a small step, he was finally starting to have a place in his son's life. As Ryan stepped out of Carter Estate, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced at the screen. Sophie Lancaster. Her name made him pause. Sophie wasn't just his girlfriend for the past 3 years. She was also his business partner in New York, the woman who had been by his side through every career milestone. Beautiful, sharp, ambitious, Sophie embodied everything about the life Ryan had built over the past decade, a life where things like family and unexpected children had no place. He exhaled heavily before answering. "Ryan, you finally decided to pick up." Her voice was cool, controlled. He rubbed his temple, his voice rough. "I've been busy." "Busy with what?" Sophie snapped. "I'm waiting in New York. The company is waiting. And where are you? Wasting time in some small town with people who don't matter anymore." Ryan gritted his teeth. "It's complicated, Sophie." "Then simplify it," she scoffed. "You need to come back." He paused for a long moment, then spoke carefully. "I have a son." Silence. Then, after a long pause, Sophie let out a hollow laugh. Tell me you're joking." "I'm not. His name is Jake, and I'm not walking away from him." Sophie's breathing suddenly turned eerily calm. "Then we need to talk in person. I'm coming to Ridgewood tomorrow." Before Ryan could respond, the call ended abruptly. He leaned back against his seat, knowing that another storm was on its way. Ryan spent the entire next day feeling uneasy. He knew Sophie was coming, and the confrontation was inevitable. But before that could happen, something else shook him to his core. That afternoon, Ryan went to Emily's house. He wanted to talk to her about Sophie, about Jake, about everything, but as he walked in, he saw Jake cleaning his room, pulling a dusty old box from under the bed. "What's that, buddy?" Ryan asked. Jake shrugged. "Just some of Mom's old stuff." Ryan's heart skipped a beat. He knelt down, lifting the lid. Inside, there were dozens of letters, all addressed to Ryan Carter. Letters that had never been sent. His hands trembled as he pulled out the first one, the date, 10 years ago. He unfolded it, his eyes scanning Emily's familiar handwriting. "Ryan, I don't know if you'll ever read this. I don't even know if you care, but I have to try. I'm pregnant." Ryan clenched the paper, guilt and anguish crushing him. Emily had tried to tell him. She had wanted him to know, but he hadn't been there to listen. Taking a deep breath, he stood. It was time to face Emily. He couldn't run from this truth any longer. Ryan gripped the letters tightly as he stepped onto Emily's back porch. He knew she was there, standing quietly by the railing, her gaze distant as she looked out over the garden. She didn't turn as she spoke. "You found them, didn't you?" Ryan stared at the letters, his voice hoarse. "Why didn't you send them?" Emily sighed, finally turning to face him. "You never answered any of Eleanor's calls or letters. When I went to New York, I saw you with Sophie. That's when I realized you had moved on. So what was the point?" Ryan hated how much sense that made, but it didn't ease the ache in his chest. "But you tried," he whispered. "You wanted me to know." Emily looked at him, her eyes softening for just a moment before she folded her arms across her chest, shielding herself. "Well, now you do, Ryan. So what are you going to do about it?" Ryan took a deep breath. For the first time in his life, he had a clear answer. "I'm staying." Emily froze, clearly caught off guard. "What?" Ryan held her gaze steady. "I spent 10 years chasing something that doesn't matter anymore. The company, New York, none of it means anything if I don't have my son. I'm not going anywhere." Emily studied him for a long time, then murmured, "Prove it." Ryan nodded. He would. Ryan sat in the cafe, waiting for the storm that was Sophie Lancaster. When she arrived, eyes sharp with anger, he knew this wouldn't be easy. "What the hell are you thinking, Ryan?" she spat. Ryan remained calm. "I have a son, and I can't walk away from him." Sophie let out a cold laugh. "You think fatherhood is that simple? What about your career? What about us?" "I'm sorry, Sophie, but the company was never my family." That sentence ended everything. Without hesitation, Sophie threw a glass of water in his face and stormed out. The next morning, she unexpectedly showed up at Emily's house. When she saw Ryan there, she simply smiled softly. No anger, just quiet acceptance. "I thought you belonged to a different world, but maybe you finally found where you're meant to be." She turned to Emily, nodding. "Take care of him." Emily hesitated but nodded back. "I will." Before leaving, Sophie looked at Ryan. "I hope Jake is worth everything you're giving up." Ryan met her gaze, unwavering. "He's not what I gave up. He's what I finally found." Sophie said nothing more, just nodded and walked away, closing the final chapter of his past. For the next few days, Ryan spent every moment getting closer to Jake. He took him to baseball practice, helped with homework, and treated him to ice cream in the evenings. One afternoon, they sat by the lake as the sun began to set. Ryan picked up a stone and skipped it across the water, watching the ripples spread. "You know how to do that?" Jake grinned. Ryan raised an eyebrow, pretending to be offended. "Not just know, I'm an expert." Jake giggled. "Then let's see who's better." They took turns throwing stones, their laughter filling the quiet air. Then, suddenly, Jake paused. His bright blue eyes grew serious, his fingers nervously gripping a small rock. He stared at the water for a long moment before whispering, "Ryan, can I call you Dad?" Ryan froze. His chest tightened. The air around him seemed to disappear. Jake kept his gaze down, voice small but filled with longing. "At school, all my friends have dads. I want to have a dad too." Ryan swallowed hard, his throat burning with emotion. He knelt down, placing a steady hand on Jake's shoulder. "Jake, I've always been your dad." His voice was firm, unwavering. Jake's face lit up, and without warning, he threw his arms around Ryan's neck. Ryan closed his eyes, holding his son tightly. This was the most important moment of his life. It had taken him 10 years to find this, and this time, he wasn't letting it go. Over the next few weeks, Ryan proved with actions that he wasn't leaving. He wasn't just there for Jake. He was there for Emily too, even if she still kept a cautious distance. One evening, after Ryan picked up Jake from baseball practice, Emily spoke unexpectedly. "Would you like to come inside?" Ryan froze for a second, then nodded. For the first time, she was inviting him in. They sat on the wooden porch, watching Jake play in the yard. Emily sighed. "I used to think you'd leave again." Ryan turned to her. "I'm not going anywhere." She was silent for a long moment, then smiled softly. "I know." That night, after Jake had gone to bed, Ryan took Emily's hands in his. "I've spent 10 years chasing the wrong things. I don't want to waste another second." Emily blinked as Ryan knelt down, pulling out a small but elegant ring. "Emily, I love you. I love our son. Let me help rebuild what we should have never lost. Will you marry me?" Tears shimmered in Emily's green eyes, but this time they weren't of pain, but of happiness. She nodded. "Yes." Ryan chuckled, sliding the ring onto her finger before pulling her into a deep, loving kiss. From inside, the sound of small footsteps echoed. "Mom, Dad, what are you doing?" Jake rubbed his sleepy eyes. Ryan and Emily laughed. Ryan reached out, pulling his son into his arms, pressing a light kiss on his hair. "We're starting a family, buddy, a real one." And this time, Ryan knew he had finally found home.
Nathan Hart, a wealthy and powerful CEO, walked into Maison Lumiere, Manhattan's most exclusive French restaurant, with his stunning date, Isabella Moore. The evening exuded perfection. Elegant chandeliers, the scent of truffles, and soft murmurs of wealth and sophistication. Nathan thrived in this world of control and success, using every detail to reinforce his image. But, as he sipped his wine, a figure emerging from the kitchen caught his eye. Sophie Reynolds, his ex-wife, was serving tables. Nathan's world tilted. She wore a simple black apron, her face etched with quiet strength. But what shocked him most was the unmistakable curve of her pregnant belly. Their eyes met briefly, Sophie's expression cold and unreadable. She quickly disappeared into the kitchen, leaving Nathan frozen, his mind racing. Who was the father? Why was she working here? "Nathan, are you okay?" Isabella's voice pulled him back, but his calm facade was already cracking. Everything had changed in an instant, and Nathan knew he couldn't leave without confronting his past. Nathan didn't wait long. The moment Isabella excused herself to take a call, he slipped away from their table and headed toward the kitchen. His polished shoes clicked sharply against the marble floor, the sound matching the urgency in his chest. He found Sophie near the prep station, stacking plates with the practiced efficiency of someone trying to keep busy. When she saw him, she froze, her hands tightening on the edge of the counter. "Nathan," she said, her voice cool but steady. "You're not supposed to be back here." "I needed to talk to you," he said, ignoring the glances from nearby staff. His eyes darted to her stomach, unable to look away. "You pregnant?" Haha, Sophie's expression didn't waver, and his jaw tightened. "Is it mine?" A beat of silence stretched between them before Sophie shook her head, her voice clipped. "No. It's not." "What?" But Nathan knew her too well. The way her gaze faltered for just a second, the subtle tremor in her hands. It wasn't convincing. He stepped closer, his tone softening. "Sophie, if it's mine, I need to know." She met his gaze, her eyes hard. "You lost the right to demand answers from me a long time ago." Her words stung, but Nathan didn't back down. "You owe me the truth." Sophie's laugh was bitter. "The truth? You never cared about the truth, Nathan. You only cared about control. That's why we're not together anymore." Her words cut deeper than he expected, leaving him momentarily speechless. Sophie used the pause to grab her tray and brush past him. "Go back to your perfect life, Nathan. I'm not part of it anymore." That night, Nathan couldn't sleep. Sophie's words replayed in his mind, pulling him back to the years they had spent together. Their marriage had started with love, but as his career soared, their connection had frayed. She had wanted a family, but Nathan had dismissed the idea, calling it a distraction. He'd told himself he was building a future for them, but in reality, he'd built walls. They'd kept her out. The next day, unable to shake the unease, Nathan made a call. He hired a private investigator to uncover the truth about Sophie's pregnancy and the life she'd led since their divorce. What he learned unsettled him. Sophie had struggled after they parted, refusing any financial help from him. She'd worked tirelessly to rebuild her life and, most surprising of all, she'd sought fertility treatments while they were still married. Nathan stared at the report in his hands, a wave of guilt washing over him. Sophie had wanted a child, a chance at the family he'd denied her, and now she had one. But was it his? Or was it too late to be part of her life at all? In the days that followed, he began frequenting the Maison Lumière under the guise of business dinners, though his real motive was Sophie. Every time he saw her, moving gracefully between tables, her face calm yet alert, it fueled his determination to break down the walls she had erected. But Sophie kept her distance, answering his attempts at conversation tersely and professionally. Worse still, Nathan noticed Daniel Carter, the restaurant manager, hovering near Sophie whenever Nathan was around. One evening, as Sophie was leaving the restaurant after her shift, Nathan stopped her. "Sophie, wait," she sighed, clutching her coat. "What do you want, Nathan?" "Talk," he said seriously. "I need to understand." She turned to face him, her eyes filled with exhaustion and disappointment. "What's there to understand? You were never there, Nathan. Not for me, not for us. You made your choice." Her words were painful, but Nathan continued. "You made a mistake, Sophie. I know, but I'm trying to make things right. There seems to be no end of mischief created by our two teams at war." She shook her head, her voice shaking. "You can't go back now just because you feel guilty. You don't want a family, remember? You don't want me." Nathan's chest tightened. "That's not true." Sophie's eyes pierced him. "Right? You were so busy chasing success you didn't even notice I was drifting away, and now you think showing up and asking questions is going to fix everything." She stepped closer, her voice soft but still full of pain. "Nathan, I don't need you to fix anything. I've learned to live without you. She turned and walked away, leaving Nathan standing alone on the sidewalk, his hands clenched into fists. Despite Sophie's words, Nathan couldn't ignore the truth he'd uncovered about her struggles, and about himself. For years he had believed that his drive and ambition were his greatest assets, but now he saw the cost: a broken marriage, and the possibility of a child he'd never known about. Determined, he found himself spending less time at the office and more time observing Sophie from afar, trying to understand the life she'd built without him. One evening, as he lingered at the bar after a meal, Daniel approached him. The man's demeanor was polite, but firm. "Mr. Hart," Daniel began, "if you're here for Sophie, you should know she's been through enough. She doesn't need you complicating her life." Nathan raised an eyebrow. "And you're the one looking out for her?" "Yes," Daniel replied, his tone steady, "because I care about her." "Can you say the same, or is this just about your pride?" The words struck a nerve, but Nathan didn't lash out. Instead, he nodded slowly. "I care about her," he said, "and I'm not giving up." Sophie continued to avoid him, but one night, as she wiped down tables after closing, Nathan approached her again. "Just hear me out," he pleaded. Sophie sighed, setting down her cloth. "Fine, say what you need to say." Nathan hesitated, searching for the right words. "I didn't see it then, but I see it now. I was selfish. I thought providing for us meant working harder, building something bigger. I didn't realize what I was losing until it was gone." Sophie folded her arms, her expression unreadable. "I know I can't change the past," he continued, "but if there's any chance, if this baby is mine—" "It's not about the baby," Sophie interrupted, her voice breaking slightly. "It's about trust. I trusted you, Nathan, and you pushed me away. I can't let that happen again. Not for me, and not for my child." Her words hung in the air like a verdict. Nathan nodded slowly, realizing that while his intentions were sincere, rebuilding her trust would take more than just apologies. It would take time and actions that proved he'd truly changed. It happened on a cold, rainy night. Sophie had just finished her shift at Millionaire and was trudging home, her feet aching and her body weighed down by exhaustion. The baby was restless tonight, kicking harder than usual, and Sophie felt a sharp pang in her lower abdomen. She paused on the stairwell to her apartment, gripping the railing to steady herself. "It's nothing," she whispered to herself, "just a long day." But the pain intensified as she unlocked her door. By the time she reached her couch, her breaths were shallow, her vision blurred. Her neighbor, Rachel, heard the thud of Sophie collapsing and rushed in, her face pale with panic. "Sophie, oh my God, are you okay?" Sophie shook her head weakly. "I'll be fine. I just need to rest." But Rachel wasn't convinced. "You need help. I'm calling someone." "No hospitals," Sophie protested, her voice hoarse. Rachel hesitated, unsure what to do, but her instincts told her Sophie needed immediate care. Desperate, she scrolled through her phone until she landed on the one person she knew might help: Nathan Hart. Nathan was working late in his penthouse office when his phone buzzed. Seeing an unknown number, he almost ignored it. But something compelled him to answer. "Mr. Hart." Rachel's voice trembled. "This is Sophie's neighbor. She's in trouble. I don't know who else to call." In an instant, Nathan was on his feet. "What happened? Is she okay?" "She's in pain. Something's wrong with the baby. Please, can you come quickly?" "I'm on my way." The drive to Sophie's apartment felt endless, though Nathan's driver weaved through traffic at breakneck speed. When he arrived, he found Rachel pacing nervously outside Sophie's door. "She's in there," Rachel said, pointing. Nathan burst in to find Sophie slumped on the couch, her face pale and damp with sweat. Her eyes fluttered open as he knelt beside her. "Nathan?" she murmured. her voice barely audible. "I'm here," he said firmly, his hand gripping hers. "I'm taking you to the hospital." "No," Sophie tried to protest, but another wave of pain silenced her. Nathan scooped her up gently, ignoring her weak protests, and carried her to the waiting car. "Drive. Fast," he barked at the driver. At Parkside Memorial Hospital, Sophie was rushed into the maternity ward. Nathan stayed by her side, his heart pounding, as doctors and nurses worked swiftly around them. The words "premature labor" and "stabilize her" swirled in the air, but all Nathan could focus on was Sophie's face. Her grip on his hand tightened as another contraction racked her body. I can't do this," she gasped. "Yes, you can," Nathan said, his voice steady despite his fear. "You're the strongest person I know, Sophie. I'm right here. I'm not leaving." Tears streamed down her face, but she nodded, finding strength in his words. Hours later, the cries of a newborn pierced the tense silence of the delivery room. The nurse gently placed a tiny baby boy into Sophie's arms. Despite her exhaustion, Sophie smiled weakly, tears glistening in her eyes. Nathan stood frozen, his gaze locked on the child. "Noah," Sophie whispered. "His name is Noah." The baby stirred, his tiny hand curling into a fist. Nathan reached out hesitantly, his fingertip brushing Noah's soft skin. In that moment, a wave of emotion overwhelmed him. Pride, awe, and a love so profound, it brought tears to his eyes. Sophie looked up at Nathan, her expression softer than it had been in years. "Thank you," she said quietly. Nathan shook his head, his voice breaking. "No, Sophie, thank you." For the first time, Nathan truly understood the depth of Sophie's strength and the sacrifices she had made. Holding his son, he vowed silently that he would do whatever it took to be the man they deserved. Nathan was a changed man after Noah's birth. Holding his son for the first time had awakened something in him, a deep sense of responsibility and love he hadn't realized he was capable of. He threw himself into fatherhood with the same intensity he once reserved for his career. He cut his work hours drastically, delegated responsibilities at Heart Tech, and spent every free moment learning how to care for his son. Nathan marveled at the smallest things, Noah's tiny fingers clutching his own, the way the baby's cries subsided when he hummed a lullaby, even the messy triumph of changing his first diaper. But Sophie was cautious. While she allowed Nathan to visit and be involved with Noah, she kept her emotional distance. She watched him carefully, uncertain if this new Nathan was here to stay or just a temporary version of the man she had once known. One evening, as Nathan sat on Sophie's couch, rocking Noah to sleep, she finally broke the silence. "You've been different," she said softly. Nathan glanced at her, his voice equally gentle. "I'm trying, Sophie. I know I can't undo the past, but I want to be here for you and Noah. I want to be better." Sophie looked at him for a long moment, before nodding, though her guarded expression didn't waver. Nathan's biggest challenge came in the form of Daniel Carter. The restaurant manager had been a steady presence in Sophie's life, offering her support and friendship when Nathan had been absent. One evening, Nathan found Daniel waiting for him outside Maison Lumiere. "We need to talk," Daniel said bluntly. Nathan folded his arms, his posture tense. "If this is about Sophie, I'm not backing down." Daniel's gaze was piercing. "Good, because if you're here just to prove something or to satisfy your pride, walk away now. Sophie and Noah deserve better." "I'm not here to prove anything," Nathan said firmly. I'm here because they're my family. I won't make the same mistakes again." Daniel studied him for a moment before nodding, though his tone remained cautious. "Then prove it. Not to me, but to her." Nathan took Daniel's words to heart. He knew action spoke louder than words, so he poured his energy into rebuilding Sophie's trust. He showed up every day, not just for Noah, but for her too. When Sophie was overwhelmed, Nathan was there to help. He cooked meals, cleaned her apartment, and spent hours reading parenting books. He didn't push Sophie for anything more than she was ready to give, knowing she needed to see consistency, not promises. One afternoon as they sat together on the floor, with Noah between them, Nathan spoke quietly. "Sophie, I know I let you down before. I wasn't the husband you deserved, and I won't pretend I can fix everything overnight, but I'm not going anywhere. I'm here. For good." Sophie didn't respond right away, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes, a small crack in the walls she had built. The journey wasn't easy. Nathan had to face his own shortcomings and learned patience in a way he never had before, but with each passing day, he found joy in the little moments. Noah's first smile, the way Sophie's laugh returned in fleeting bursts, the warmth of being part of a family he hadn't once taken for granted. He knew he had a long way to go, but for the first time, Nathan felt like he was on the right path. A year later, at Riverside Park, families strolling under the fall foliage. Nathan stood near the Hudson River, holding Noah in his arms. The baby hummed softly, holding his father's finger with surprising strength. Sophie slowly approached behind them, her hands tucked into her coat pockets. She stopped a few feet away, watching Nathan interact gently with their son. It was a side of him she hadn't seen in their entire marriage, a side she didn't believe he was capable of. "You're getting better at it," Sophie said softly, breaking the silence. Nathan turned, smiling as Noah babbled happily. "He's a good teacher," he replied. Sophie joined them on the riverbank, her eyes lingering on the city skyline. For a moment, neither of them spoke, the sound of the wind and distant laughter filling the space between them. "Sophie," Nathan began, his voice even but full of emotion. "I need to say this, and I need you to listen to me." She looked at him wary but curious. "I know I've let you down," he continued. "I spent so much of our marriage chasing success that I forgot what was really important. I thought building an empire was how I showed my love, but I was wrong. I didn't listen to you. I didn't see you." His voice shook slightly as he looked down at Noah, then back at Sophie. "But losing you taught me something I should have known a long time ago. Nothing matters without you and Noah. You're my family. You're the most important thing in my life, and I'll spend every day proving that to you." Sophie's eyes glistened with unshed tears, but she remained silent, her heart torn between the man he had been and the man he was becoming. "I know I haven't earned your trust yet," Nathan added, "but I hope you'll give me a chance to earn it." Sophie took a deep breath, her eyes drifting to Noah, who was now giggling at a leaf drifting by. She slowly met Nathan's eyes. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Nathan. Not yet." Nathan nodded, his expression soft but firm. "I understand. Give me time. I'm not going anywhere." Sophie hesitated, then smiled weakly. "For Noah's sake, we can try. But this has to be real, Nathan. No flashy gestures, no empty promises. Just here." "I will," Nathan said simply, his voice unmistakable. The three of them continued walking, the barrier between Sophie and Nathan not falling apart, as Noah and they were ready to bond. Nathan pushed Noah's stroller as Sophie walked beside him, their conversation light but sincere. For the first time in years, Sophie felt a glimmer of hope, not just for Nathan, but for the family she had always dreamed of. Nathan's journey wasn't about winning Sophie back. It was about becoming a better man. For her, for Noah, and for himself. He learned that love wasn't about control or appearances, but about sacrifice, patience, and presence. Sophie, too, realized that while past wounds left scars, healing was possible if both hearts were willing to try. And as they stood together at the park, watching Noah's tiny fingers reach for the autumn leaves, they began to rebuild what was lost. One moment, one step, one act of love at a time. It wasn't a perfect ending, but it was a new beginning.
The rain poured relentlessly, blanketing the city in a shroud of gloom. Liam Hargrave, a renowned architect celebrated for his groundbreaking designs, sat silently in the back seat of his car. The windshield wipers struggled against the downpour, their rhythmic swipes only heightening the emptiness in his chest. Despite his success, Liam couldn't escape the shadow of loss that clung to him ever since the death of his wife, Rachel, in a tragic accident. His life, once filled with ambition, had shrunk to a singular purpose: his son Ethan. Ethan was all Liam had left, but the boy's struggle with severe anxiety and emotional withdrawal weighed heavily on his father's heart. No amount of therapy or medical intervention seemed to break through the walls Ethan had built around himself. Liam felt powerless, a man used to creating structures that touched the sky, yet unable to rebuild his own family. As the car turned onto a narrow street, the headlights illuminated a frail figure huddled beneath the pouring rain. Liam leaned forward, narrowing his eyes. A young woman stood clutching a small child, her arms wrapped protectively around him. Her clothes were soaked, clinging to her as she braved the storm. "Stop the car," Liam ordered, his voice cutting through the steady drumming of the rain. His driver hesitated but obeyed. Stepping out into the storm, Liam approached the pair. The young woman looked up, startled, her eyes a mixture of defiance and vulnerability. "Are you all right?" Liam asked, his voice softer now. The woman hesitated before replying. "He's lost. I found him in the alley, but I don't know where to take him." Liam felt something stir inside him, a rare spark of compassion. "Come with me," he said, surprising even himself. Liam hesitated for a moment, his thoughts clouded with doubt. Bringing a stranger into his home was something he would never have considered before. His mansion was his fortress, a place where only a select few were allowed entry. But as he looked at Sophie standing in the rain, shielding the crying boy with her frail frame, something shifted inside him. Her determination to protect a child she didn't even know reminded him of Rachel, his late wife. She had possessed the same unyielding compassion, the same instinct to help those in need, no matter the cost. It wasn't just about Sophie. It was about Ethan. Liam knew his son needed something more than what therapists and caregivers could offer. Sophie's kindness, so genuine and unguarded, struck a chord in him. Maybe, just maybe, she could provide the emotional connection Ethan desperately needed. "I'll take the risk," Liam thought to himself. And so, with a mix of hope and uncertainty, Liam opened his door to Sophie, knowing full well that he was stepping into uncharted territory. The Hargrave residence loomed like a fortress of glass and steel, its cold elegance a stark contrast to the warmth Sophie had tried to offer the lost child just hours ago. As Liam led Sophie and the boy through the grand entrance, She felt small under the high ceilings and opulent chandeliers. Her worn-out sneakers squeaked against the polished marble floors, each step amplifying her discomfort. As the rain continued to pour that night, Liam arranged for the boy to stay in a warm guest room. Sophie stayed by his side, comforting him until he finally fell asleep. The next morning, Liam contacted the local authorities, who quickly identified the boy as Daniel, a 5-year-old who had gone missing during a shopping trip with his mother. Later that day, Daniel's mother arrived at the mansion, tears streaming down her face as she embraced her son. "Thank you so much," she said, her voice breaking as she turned to Liam and Sophie. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't found him." Sophie knelt down to meet Daniel's gaze. "Stay safe, okay?" she said gently. Daniel nodded, holding his mother's hand tightly. "Thank you, Miss Sophie." As Liam watched the emotional reunion, he felt an unexpected warmth. Sophie's selflessness had brought Daniel and his family back together. It solidified Liam's belief that, despite the risks, inviting Sophie into his home had been the right decision. The next morning, the housekeeper, Margaret, greeted Sophie with a thin smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mr. Hargrave expects you to assist with his son Ethan," Margaret said, her voice clipped. "Follow me." Sophie was led to Ethan's room, a space filled with muted colors and untouched toys. The boy, no older than 7, sat cross-legged on the floor, his back to the door. He was pale, his eyes downcast, and he flinched at the slightest sound. "Ethan," Sophie said gently, kneeling at his level. "Hi, I'm Sophie." Ethan didn't respond, but his small hands trembled as they clutched a stuffed dinosaur. Sophie stayed quiet for a moment, letting the silence settle before speaking again. "Do you like dinosaurs?" she asked softly. Ethan's head tilted slightly, a flicker of curiosity breaking through his guarded demeanor. Sophie smiled, pulling out a book from the shelf nearby. "I love dinosaurs. Want me to read to you?" Margaret, watching from the doorway, frowned. "You're wasting your time," she muttered under her breath. But as Sophie began reading, Ethan scooted closer, his eyes fixed on the pages. Word of Sophie's interaction with Ethan quickly spread among the household staff. Some regarded her with curiosity, others with outright suspicion. Margaret, in particular, seemed to take issue with Sophie's presence. "Mr. Hargrave," she said one afternoon, cornering Liam in his study, "that girl has no place here. She's unqualified and unreliable." "Just helping Ethan," Liam replied curtly, brushing past her. Despite Margaret's protests, Sophie's bond with Ethan deepened. Each day she coaxed him out of his shell with stories, games, and a gentle patience no one else seemed to offer. Liam began to notice the small changes, a hint of a smile on Ethan's face, fewer sleepless nights, and an eagerness to spend time outside the confines of his room. But Sophie's presence also brought unintended tension. Margaret, feeling her authority waning, grew colder. The other staff whispered behind Sophie's back, their gazes sharp and judgmental. Late one evening, as Sophie sat beside Ethan, reading his favorite book, Liam stood quietly in the doorway. He watched as his son leaned against Sophie, his small hand clutching hers. It was a sight he hadn't seen in years. Ethan, calm and content. "You've done more for him in 2 weeks than any therapist has in 2 years," Liam said quietly as Sophie tucked Ethan into bed. Sophie looked up, surprised. "I just try to listen to him," she replied. "Sometimes kids don't need someone to fix them. They just need someone to be there." For the first time in years, Liam felt a glimmer of hope, but alongside it came uncertainty. Who was Sophie really? And what was she hiding behind her kind eyes and soft smile? In the quiet hours of the night, Sophie often found herself staring at the ceiling of her small guest room, her thoughts heavy with memories. This wasn't the first time she had taken care of a child who needed her. Growing up in foster care, she had spent years looking after her younger brother Oliver, protecting him from the harsh realities of their world. But when they were separated, Sophie's life spiraled into a series of hardships. Temporary shelters, unsafe streets, and an endless search for the one person she couldn't bear to lose. Her days at the Hargrave residence offered a fragile sense of stability, but Sophie never forgot her mission: to find Oliver. Between caring for Ethan and dodging Margaret's icy stares, Sophie scoured online records, called old social workers, and followed every lead, no matter how faint. Her hope was a flickering flame, but it burned fiercely. Meanwhile, Margaret's animosity towards Sophie grew. The housekeeper's role had always been central to the Hargrave household, and Sophie's arrival disrupted the balance. Margaret couldn't understand why Liam trusted a homeless girl over her. Her suspicion turned to disdain, and soon she began scheming to drive Sophie out. It started with small acts of sabotage: misplaced keys, missing items conveniently found near Sophie's belongings. Then came the rumors. Margaret whispered to the other staff that Sophie had ulterior motives, that she was using Ethan to secure a place in the Hargrave household. "She's too good to be true," Margaret told the cook one afternoon. "Mark my words, she'll show her true colors soon enough." Unaware of the brewing storm, Sophie focused on Ethan, who was making remarkable progress. One sunny afternoon, Sophie brought him outside to the garden, coaxing him to play with a kite. Liam watched from his office window, his heart swelling, as Ethan laughed. A sound he hadn't heard in years. But Margaret saw the scene differently. To her, Sophie was not just an outsider, but a threat. That evening, as Liam reviewed blueprints in his study, Margaret entered, her expression grave. "Mr. Hargrave, we need to talk about Sophie," she began, her voice heavy with feigned concern. Liam frowned, but gestured for her to continue. "I've noticed things going missing, small but valuable items," Margaret said, her tone conspiratorial. "Jewelry, a silver bracelet, even some cash. I didn't want to believe it, but..." She trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air. Liam's jaw tightened. "Are you accusing Sophie?" "I wouldn't dare without proof," Margaret replied quickly. "But it's my duty to protect this household. I found this in her room." She held up an expensive brooch, its gold surface gleaming under the study's light. Liam's eyes narrowed. He didn't want to believe it, but doubt crept in. He had taken Sophie in without knowing much about her. Could Margaret be right? That night, Liam installed a small camera in Ethan's room, disguised among the boys' toys. It wasn't just to monitor Ethan's progress, it also captured part of the hallway leading to Sophie's room. Over the next few days, Liam reviewed the footage, expecting the worst, but instead of evidence against Sophie, he saw moments that caught him off guard. Sophie comforting Ethan during his nightmares, telling him stories from her own life, stories of her childhood with Oliver, their games, and her unwavering promise to find him. One night, the camera captured something even more telling. Margaret, clutching the brooch she had claimed Sophie had stolen, sneaking into Sophie's room and planting it among her belongings. Liam's heart sank as he watched the betrayal unfold. The next morning, Liam confronted Margaret in the study, the footage playing on his laptop. "Care to explain this?" he asked coldly. Margaret's face turned pale. I was trying to protect you," she stammered. "By lying," Liam snapped. "You tried to destroy someone who has done nothing but help this family. Pack your things and leave." Margaret's protests fell on deaf ears. By noon, she was gone, and Sophie, who had remained oblivious to the ordeal, noticed the sudden shift in the household's atmosphere. That evening, Liam found Sophie reading to Ethan in the library. He sat down across from her, his expression uncharacteristically soft. "You don't have to worry about Margaret anymore," he said simply. Sophie looked up, confusion flickering in her eyes. "Why would I?" "Because she tried to frame you," Liam admitted. "I'm sorry I doubted you, even for a moment." Sophie's heart ached at the thought, but she managed a small smile. "Thank you," she said quietly. Liam nodded. "I owe you more than an apology, Sophie. You've done so much for Ethan, and for me." But as Sophie returned to her room that night, her mind wasn't on Liam's gratitude. It was on Oliver. She clutched the worn photograph of her brother, whispering a silent promise to find him no matter what. Sophie couldn't stop staring at the address on the screen. After weeks of searching, a social worker had finally given her the lead she'd been praying for. Oliver, her little brother, was alive and living in a foster home on the edge of the city. But the news came with a harsh reality. The family taking care of him had a history of neglect and mistreatment. That evening, Sophie approached Liam in his study, her hands trembling as she held the printed report. "I found him," she said softly, her voice breaking with emotion. Liam looked up, concern etching his features. "Oliver?" She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "But he's not safe, Liam. I need to get him out of there." Liam studied her for a moment before replying, "We'll go together." The following afternoon, Liam and Sophie drove through a rundown neighborhood. The houses were dilapidated, the streets littered with broken glass and forgotten toys. Sophie clutched a photograph of Oliver as they pulled up to a small, grimy house with peeling paint and a sagging porch. "Are you ready?" Liam asked, his voice steady but kind. Sophie nodded, though her heart raced with fear and anticipation. They approached the door, and before they could knock, it swung open. A burly man with a scowl that matched the house's menacing exterior stood in the doorway. His eyes darted between Liam and Sophie, landing on her with an unsettling smirk. "What do you want?" he growled. "I'm here for my brother," Sophie said firmly, holding up the photo. "Oliver?" The man let out a bitter laugh. "Your brother? That brat doesn't have anyone. What kind of scam is this?" Before Sophie could respond, a thin, wiry figure appeared behind him. Sophie's breath caught as her eyes met Oliver's. He was taller now, his face gaunt, but his eyes, those big, dark eyes, were unmistakable. "Oliver?" Sophie whispered, stepping forward. The boy's expression hardened as he pushed past the man and stood on the porch. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice laced with suspicion. "It's me, Sophie, your sister," she said, her voice trembling. "I've been looking for you for so long." Oliver's gaze flickered to the photo in her hand, but his face remained cold. "You're lying," he said flatly. "I don't have a sister. She left me." The words hit Sophie like a punch to the gut. "I never left you," she pleaded. "They separated us. I tried to stay, but—" "You didn't try hard enough," Oliver shouted, his voice breaking. "You abandoned me. Everyone does." Liam stepped forward, his presence calm but firm. "Oliver, your sister has spent years trying to find you. She loves you. Don't let someone else's lies convince you otherwise." Before Sophie could say more, the sound of a car pulling up interrupted the tense moment. She turned, her heart sinking as she saw Margaret step out of a sleek car, her expression triumphant and cold. "Well, isn't this touching?" Margaret sneered, striding toward them with calculated confidence. "It wasn't hard to find you," she said, her voice dripping with malice. "I've been keeping tabs on you for weeks." "What are you doing here?" Liam demanded, his voice icy. Margaret shrugged. "I've been in touch with Oliver. He knows everything, Liam. Everything Sophie won't admit." Sophie's blood ran cold. "What lies did you tell him?" "Lies?" Margaret sneered. "I told him the truth. How you abandoned him, how you've been manipulating Liam and Ethan to save yourself." Oliver's gaze shifted between Sophie and Margaret, his confusion evident. "Is that true?" he whispered. "No," Sophie cried. "Oliver, please listen to me. I've been looking for you since the day they took you away. I never stopped." "She's lying to hurt us." Margaret stepped closer to Oliver, her voice syrupy sweet. "She's just saying what you want to hear, Oliver. She doesn't care about you. She never has." Liam's patience snapped. "Enough, Margaret," he roared, stepping between her and the children. "You've done enough damage. Leave, or I'll make sure you regret it." Margaret's smirk faltered, but she recovered quickly. "This isn't over," she hissed, before retreating to her car. The sound of the engine fading into the distance left an uneasy silence. Sophie turned back to Oliver, her heart breaking at the doubt in his eyes. "Do you remember the swing?" she asked softly. Oliver frowned. "What swing?" "The one in the foster home garden. Sophie continued, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. I used to push you on it every afternoon after school. You told me that when we grew up, we'd build a swing just for us, one no one else could use. Oliver's eyes widened, his lips trembling as if he were holding back tears. I don't know if I can believe you, he whispered, his voice cracking, but as Sophie continued, his guarded expression began to crumble. Slowly, he stepped closer, his arms dropping to his sides in a gesture of surrender. Sophie reached out gently. I never forgot, Oliver. I've been holding on to that promise, and I'll never leave you again. Tears welled in his eyes as he looked at her, his hardened exterior crumbling. With a strangled sob, Oliver threw himself into her arms, clutching her tightly. Sophie held him close, her own tears falling freely. I love you, little brother. I'm so sorry, she whispered. Liam watched quietly, his chest tightening with emotion. As the siblings clung to each other, he felt a renewed determination to protect them both from whatever came next. The tension at the Hargrave mansion was palpable in the days following Sophie's reunion with Oliver. Though the siblings had begun to mend their bond, the shadow of Margaret's interference lingered. Liam remained on high alert, knowing Margaret's departure from their lives wouldn't be the end of her schemes. His instincts proved correct when a letter from a law firm arrived, bearing accusations that Sophie had manipulated Oliver to gain access to the Hargrave estate. She's claiming I used Oliver to manipulate you and Ethan, Sophie said, her voice trembling as she read the legal summons in Liam's study. Liam's jaw tightened, his eyes scanning the document. And she's fabricated evidence to back it up, he said grimly. Oliver, who had been silently listening, slammed his fist on the desk. This is insane. She's the one who lied to me. She's the one who tried to turn me against Sophie. Liam placed a reassuring hand on the boy's shoulder. We'll fight this, Oliver. Margaret underestimated us. She didn't think we'd be ready. Sophie looked at Liam, her eyes filled with doubt. How can we fight someone like her? She has money, connections. And I have resources too, Liam interrupted, his voice firm. More importantly, we have the truth on our side. That evening, Liam made a series of calls to private investigators he trusted. He explained the urgency of the situation, instructing them to dig into every aspect of Margaret's recent activities. If she had fabricated evidence, there would be a trail. Meanwhile, Oliver, determined to help, rifled through the letters and emails Margaret had sent him during their secret meetings. One name stood out: Robert Mays, a supposed former colleague of Sophie's from her foster care days. According to Margaret, Mays could prove Sophie's history of theft and deceit. Do you think he's real? Oliver asked Liam, handing over the letters. Liam frowned, reading through the documents. If Margaret named him, he's probably not who she claims. Let's find out. The investigators worked quickly, and within days, the pieces began to fall into place. Mays wasn't a colleague of Sophie's, but a disgraced private investigator Margaret had hired to forge documents and fabricate lies. They uncovered emails and bank transfers linking Margaret to Mays, detailing payments for his services. Got her, Liam said, slamming the final report onto his desk. Sophie, who had been pacing nervously, stopped and looked at him. What does this mean? It means Margaret's entire case is built on lies, Liam replied. We'll expose her in court. The trial was set for the following week, and when the day arrived, the tension was palpable. The courtroom buzzed with whispers as Sophie, Oliver, and Liam sat at the defense table. Across from them, Margaret radiated confidence, dressed impeccably in a black suit with her signature smirk firmly in place. This is just another stage for her, Sophie whispered to Liam. Liam nodded, his eyes locked on Margaret. And it'll be her last performance. The trial began with Margaret's lawyer presenting falsified documents and testimony from Mays. He painted Sophie as a manipulative opportunist who had deceived Oliver and the Hargrave family. Sophie listened in silence, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. When it was Liam's turn to present their defense, he stood calmly and addressed the court. Your Honor, The evidence presented by the plaintiff is not only false, but part of a larger scheme to destroy Sophie Collins's reputation. He gestured to the door. "I'd like to call Robert Mays to the stand." A hush fell over the courtroom as Mays was led in, his demeanor nervous and fidgety. Liam's lawyer wasted no time presenting the emails and bank transfers that tied Mays to Margaret. "Mr. Mays," the lawyer said, his voice firm, "isn't it true that you were hired by Margaret to fabricate evidence against Sophie Collins?" Mays hesitated, glancing at Margaret, who glared at him from across the courtroom. Finally, he sighed. "Yes," he admitted. Gasps rippled through the audience. Margaret shot to her feet. "He's lying," she shouted. "Order," the judge barked, pounding his gavel. Mays continued, his voice trembling. "She paid me to create fake documents. She said it was the only way to protect her reputation." Liam's lawyer turned to the judge. "Your Honor, with this testimony and the accompanying evidence, it's clear that the plaintiff's claims are baseless and malicious." The judge nodded, his expression stern. "The court finds the plaintiff guilty of fraud and evidence tampering. All charges against Sophie Collins are hereby dismissed." Margaret's confident facade crumbled as security escorted her out of the courtroom. "You'll regret this," she screamed, her voice echoing through the chamber. Sophie felt tears streaming down her face. For the first time in what felt like forever, she could breathe freely. Liam placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, and Oliver leaned closer, whispering, "We did it." As they left the courthouse together, the Hargrave family felt a newfound strength. Margaret's lies had fallen, but their bond was stronger than ever. The days after the trial were like the calm after a storm. The Hargrave mansion, once filled with tension and doubt, now felt like a sanctuary. Sophie, Oliver, Liam, and Ethan began to settle into a new rhythm, one built on trust and hope. For Sophie, the weight of Margaret's lies and the constant fear of losing Oliver were finally lifted. With Liam's encouragement, she enrolled in a teacher training program, determined to build a future for herself. Her natural empathy and patience made her a favorite among her peers, and she found joy in learning how to help children like Ethan and Oliver overcome their challenges. Sophie also took time to strengthen her bond with Oliver. Though the trial had brought them closer, years of separation couldn't be erased overnight. They spent evenings talking about their childhood, their struggles, and their dreams. Oliver even began helping Sophie with her coursework, often teasing her when she struggled with math problems. "You might be great with kids," he'd say with a smirk, "but numbers clearly aren't your thing." Their laughter filled the house, a sound that had once been rare. Oliver, too, began to thrive. With Liam's guidance, he enrolled in a prestigious school where his sharp intellect quickly set him apart. At first, he was hesitant to trust anyone, but the support of his new family gave him the courage to open up. He discovered a passion for programming, spending hours tinkering with computers in Liam's study. "I think you've got a future genius on your hands," Sophie joked one evening as she watched Oliver demonstrate a coding project to Liam. Ethan, inspired by his older sister and brother, also began to blossom. With Sophie's unwavering support, he faced his physical therapy sessions with newfound determination. By the end of the year, he was walking with the help of crutches and even running short distances in the garden. "Look at me, Sophie," Ethan shouted one afternoon, his face lit up with pride as he ran toward her. She knelt down, arms wide open, and caught him in a hug. "You're amazing, Ethan," she whispered, tears of joy streaming down her face. For Liam, the transformation in his family was nothing short of miraculous. The once cold walls of his mansion now echoed with laughter and love. Watching Sophie, Oliver, and Ethan together, he realized just how much his life had changed since that stormy night when he first met Sophie. One evening, as the family gathered in the garden, Liam turned to Sophie, his heart pounding. "Sophie," he began, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant, "would you stay here? Forever?" Sophie looked at him, her eyes welling with tears. "Liam," she whispered, before throwing her arms around him. "Yes, forever." The following spring, they were married in an intimate ceremony in the garden. Oliver stood proudly as Liam's best man, and Ethan carried the rings with a wide grin. As Sophie and Liam exchanged vows, surrounded by their new family, the pain of the past seemed like a distant memory. The Hargrave mansion, once a house of solitude, had become a home. Together, they faced life's challenges with strength and unity, proving that even in the darkest times, love and hope could prevail.